Hello, and welcome to Beyond the Reading, your destination for all things paranormal, supernatural, mysterious, or just plain weird. Thank you for joining us. We're your hosts. I'm Justin Cardoza. I'm a psychic medium.
And I'm Roseanne Cardoza. I'm a para philosopher.
That's right. And tonight's topic, we will be discussing past lives. Stay tuned. Now, if you're listening to a show like this, I'm sure you're familiar with what past lives are. But for those who aren't familiar, a past life is used in reference to a previous physical life that your soul took on. Basically, like the life you're living now, except it happens over and over and over again. Well, basically, so check it out.
I'm trying to
We have to understand that we have a soul. We have a soul. Whether you agree with it or not, or whether you think that this is one life, everyone says we have one life to live. That's not true.
Well, reincarnation is actually the term that is most commonly used.
That's right.
I like to believe that reincarnation and past lives are the best way for me, as an analogy, is like a tree that has many rings on a tree. The tree has rings. Once you chop it down, it has the rings that tells you the age of the tree. Well, a person has many lives that they have lived. And each time that you were born into this world, you were born with an innate knowledge that you've accumulated over previous lives. Absolutely, over previous lives.
Right.
And not necessarily when you're first born, it's slowly downloaded over time.
Well, yeah, sure, babies aren't born knowing how to walk and talk and feed themselves.
Right.
But that brings you to a question as to, who has had past lives.
Right. And I think a lot of people have. But real quick before we go into that, because this is where it gets very complicated, I think, for me, is that it's not just we all have past lives, but there's also kind of a derivative of the past life reincarnation soul, is that there are, some people are familiar with this, but there is new souls and there are old souls. So in this particular instance, we're talking about old souls, because those are the people who have been reincarnated, who have had past lives. And with each life, when you come back, like I said, you have this innate knowledge, and your last life dictates how and what you do in this next life. So if you feared or you didn't accomplish something in your past life, you're going to come back this time around trying to rectify those shortcomings.
Right.
And I also believe that in the case of past lives for old souls, that you have the opportunity to come back. Some people choose to come back, and some people, I think the older the soul, they can choose to come back. They can pick where they want to go. Maybe trying to fulfill, a need, but that's for another conversation.
Well, no. I think we could touch on it now. Basically, so what you're saying is that the older the soul, they may have already learned certain lessons. They may have already learned what love is, how to conquer certain fears.
Right.
Because no two people on the planet have the same hurdles in life, but we all have hurdles. I think we can all agree to that.
Absolutely.
And for example, let's use a tangible example that people could wrap their minds around. So let's say in the case of relationships, now we have all had friends that may have trouble in the relationship department. Okay, and for one reason or another, they're always attracted to that abusive personality. And that is a life lesson for them on how to get away from that abusive personality. So they get into an abusive relationship, and it perpetuates itself. They leave, they think they've gotten over it, only to get into yet another abusive relationship. I believe that the whole reason that we are born and that we come to this planet and we incarnate is that we've come to learn certain lessons. And each of us have different lessons to learn. And if we don't learn them, we're doomed to repeat them.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely,
that's a case. And, if you're a person that never has a problem with that, like at the first sign somebody shows a little craziness or abusiveness, you're like, I'm out. And you have a friend that can't do that, you wonder to yourself, I just don't get it. How come they can't see it? It's because they haven't learned that lesson.
Right.
Now, what may have happened is in one of your past lives, if you're that person, you already went through that cycle. Mm-hmm. And your soul has learned that lesson not to put up with it.
Right.
And therefore, it's innate in you to not put up with it.
Right.
So a lot of times when we look at other people, that's why we should really be empathetic if they struggle in an area that we don't struggle in.
Right.
And it could just be that we've already learned that lesson.
Right.
Now, on the flip side of that, the person who's abused, they may be great with money and you're not so great with money.
Right.
But we all have struggles. And, we shouldn't judge each other on our struggles. If anything, we should help each other and try to push each other forward and lift each other up.
Absolutely. And I think this also brings us to a really good point to where I think that because of these past lives and reincarnation, I think it has done so much for the evolution of humankind. I think that I don't think we would have gotten to where we have gotten in this world with, we would still be primitives, basically nomads. Right. And cavemen, but with each life you come back with more knowledge. You're taking it. It's like downloaded, and you take that information and you build upon it. It's just layers upon layers upon layers.
And what you're talking about is evolution.
Absolutely.
Human beings not only physically evolve, we also mentally and spiritually evolve.
Emotionally,
and that's what that is.
Absolutely. And I think not only that, it's spiritually and emotionally, but it's also educationally. We evolve because we have, made huge, advances in science and just all sorts of discoveries that wouldn't have occurred if some sort of knowledge
Well, yeah.
Was it already there?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And, the fact that we could read and write, that definitely helps. Because
Right.
if all the books and internet went away and, there was a major catastrophe, we'd be set back to square one.
Right. Now, we would be in fear if, like, for instance, that there was a major catastrophe and all the old souls were wiped off the earth and there was, like, only new souls. Because to me, like, new souls are like the equivalent to a dinosaur.
Well, yeah.
You don't think so?
Well,
no, okay.
You're getting into. I could see where you're going with that, but that's starting to head into like Armageddon and biblical
no,
stuff.
No.
That
I'm just making.
Happen.
No, okay.
But
so,
I get what you're saying.
Yeah, because an old soul is a very knowledgeable person. I mean, but it also dictates so much about a person. For instance, there are people who, they have an affinity towards a certain decade. Maybe they feel so connected to something that normally it's not even something like, if you were born in the 70s, but you're like, obsessed with something in the 1940s, you have like an affinity towards that.
Sure.
It could be because you feel connected to that. There's been lots of people myself, I felt like that. Like I feel very connected to the 60s and 70s, like the music. Even though I was born in 1974, I connect to that.
You just gave yourself away.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But I know people who are like that.
Not only that.
They feel like they were born in the wrong
Let's talk about a certain friend of ours that I've done a past life reading on.
Yes.
Now, this was really interesting. Was because this guy is obsessed with Renaissance fairs and the Renaissance period. And when I did a reading for him and looked at his past lives and everything like that, it turns out, now you would think, obviously, that he lived during the Renaissance times, right? Because he's so obsessed with it.
Right.
Wrong. What happened is he was an old soul, just a very wise, calm demeanor, just, wise beyond his years. And it turns out that he not only lived through Roman times and Dark Ages.
Shanghaied.
He
and he was everything.
He was Shanghai, out of the American West, believe it or not, and I mean just all sorts of crazy stuff. And then I think he was killed in like the 20s or something.
Yeah,
like
it was something
in Chicago. Just a lot of wild, crazy stories.
Yeah, but
the one time period that he did not live in was the Renaissance period.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's so funny.
It just blew all of our minds because he was like, oh my God, I would have thought for sure
that he was connected to that.
That I was connected to that. It wasn't that he was connected to it. It's the fact that his soul was like, oh my God, that's the one period I missed.
Right. Right. So they're like drawn to it. I know that. And we also have another friend, a mutual friend, who there's two components to him. Another guy, he's really obsessed with like old buildings. Like, well, I wouldn't say obsessed. He's drawn to like 1940s buildings, but he feels like he was killed in one of those buildings. But he's also a little skittish of things. He's very he's always aware of his surroundings.
Well, I mean, look, here's the thing. If you've been whacked in the past, I mean, you're going to be a little skittish.
Right. But he's very conscious of that. And so if he's in, out and about, he's always just, he looks over his shoulder, but he
has an awareness.
Very much so. But he also takes extra precautions, but he feels very connected to those buildings. So it could be possible that that's where he was killed,
Sure.
But, that brings us to other topics in the whole past lives. There's so many things that you could dive into the past lives.
There's a lot of different facets to this, and I'd be really interested.
You remember your past life.
Well, I remember the tail end of it, and I always have, which is kind of odd. I remember, being very, very young. I was younger than 5 years old, and I remember walking through the DMZ in Vietnam holding, a rifle, an M16, and, I was just walking along, creeping along, and I knew I was somewhere I shouldn't be. And I was there, I took a step, and then I wasn't. It was just black. I wish I could say that it was a little bit more exciting than that, or...
Right.
But that's just it. The last literal maybe 2 seconds of it.
Yeah, you said it was a flash.
That's been there, and it's just a flash, a moment in time. And that's been there since I was a kid.
Right, and what's funny about that is when I first met you, when we were dating, because I love 60s and 70s music. Okay.
Right.
But you would cringe at certain songs that would come on the radio. It was almost like you would have a flashback. Like you could remember driving in a car.
Well, yeah.
And just, there was like snippets of...
Yeah, certain songs.
Almost, you would just have a flashback of like a
remember
moment.
Being in a helicopter.
Or just before you even arrive there. It's a very interesting thing, because this is going to take us into another area, because as an adult, most adults don't really remember a lot of details of their past life.
If anything at all.
Right.
If anything at
I
all.
don't have a clue.
Right.
So, however, in one of our, we have a lot of expertise in the area of children with past lives.
Right. Well, before we get into that, so here's the thing with our friend, obviously he was a Roman, all right? And, he was shanghaied from the U.S. That brings up a question now. With people, does your soul always reincarnate in the same place? Or as the same race? Or as even the same gender?
Well, wasn't he a woman?
I can't remember.
Okay. So...
Maybe.
So...
Or the same planet.
That's an interesting topic, because I've never heard anybody ever say same planet. I've never heard that.
I have.
Okay, so there has been extensive research done on past lives or reincarnation. In fact...
Yeah, it was Carl Sagan.
Yes.
Carl Sagan said something about it, believe it or not.
Yes.
And what did he say? He said that, that there's 3 claims, and I'm quoting, all right? Carl Sagan said, and I quote, "There are 3 claims in the parapsychology field, in my opinion, that deserve serious study. With one being that young children sometimes report details of a previous life, which upon checking out turns to be accurate, and which they could not have known about in any other way than reincarnation."
Right.
All right, so that's Carl Sagan talking about that, saying, hey, look, there are cases where young children, report details of their prior life. And when you check it out, it's true. It's accurate.
True. It's very accurate.
There's a number of stories, and we're going to get into that in the second half.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about some of those stories.
Yeah.
But not only that, so that's Carl Sagan. People love Carl Sagan. But now also, Nikola Tesla said that the day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in 1 decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence. This is the guy who gave us our electrical system.
Yeah, you love Nikola Tesla.
Yes, I do. Because, the guy was a genius. He said he was called a mad scientist. First off, if you're a scientist, to me, I would think that would be your ultimate goal, is to be called, like, the mad scientist. To be like, But he wasn't like that. He was a peaceful man and died destitute because of it, because he didn't want to take advantage of mankind. But that's a whole nother story. I'm sure a lot of people out there know the story by now. But this is the guy who in the late 1800s had a conference and was laughed at because he said it's possible to communicate with people on the other side of the planet in real time. Not only in real time by talking with them, but you'd actually be able to see them as well.
Right.
That's FaceTime.
Right.
I mean, he was talking about...
That's just
and
Facebook.
Yeah,
I mean,
Facebook.
Yeah. Or even, let's go back further, like AOL.
Yeah, I mean,
you know what I mean?
So it's kind of crazy. Now, one of the things that, are you always reincarnated in the same place? Obviously, the answer is no. You're going to go to wherever, I think that you choose where you go if you come back down to learn certain lessons, okay?
Yes.
Now,
but I also think you have the choice to... I think that you're born with a destiny, a purpose.
That you set forth before you come.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's, without a doubt, like... You
have certain lessons that you have to learn.
You have to learn.
Things you have to conquer.
Right.
And it all leads up to a grand finale. So that just about sums up past lives. Now understand that this is just a brief intro. So please tune in next week when we continue the conversation and actually get into some specific stories. The ones that involve the little kids that we were telling you about. Do your little ones tell you about past events that they couldn't possibly know about? Well, tune in and we're going to hear some stories where we go into it. Until then, you have a great week.